Welcome to the Private Equity Experience Podcast, your backstage pass to the strategies, stories, and secrets that drive value in the PE universe. No filters, no fluff, just straight talk and expert insights to help you navigate the private equity world with confidence. And now your hosts, Ed Barton, Rory Liebhart, and Emily Sander.
So, we are chatting about deal has closed. So PE partners have come in, due diligence has happened, decision has been made. What happens to the leadership team? What happens to the founder's role? How does this all work? So we've each been through this a few times. We've got some fun, adventurous stories with some battle scars.
Many scars.
Where do you guys want to start with this one?
Well, it could go any number of ways. I think you touched on a couple of specific roles, but as far as just generally kind of high level, what can one expect change-wise? Because change is a constant here in these scenarios. Maybe we can talk about that. That may feel different, that may not feel different, but in general, we're under a new ownership group, so that basically necessitates a lot of change.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like, let's start with the CEO, right? And then I think CFO is also like the second one who's most impacted. But like the CEO, and if that's the original founder, that's a much different structure and outlook and ballgame for that individual.
Maybe in comes a new CEO when there wasn't one aside from the founder, perhaps. Maybe we can start there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Take us through that hypothetical scenario that we may or may not have seen a couple different times here.
Well, I'll give the baton to Ed on this one. You got a little more experience than I do in particular role. Yeah.
I was going to say in a lot of cases, certainly where my experience has been, is the private equity team. So a deal closes, and they may have some question as to whether the CEO has got the right chops to be able to operate in that environment. And their normal approach is not, we're going to forklift you out day one and put someone in. Although, I've seen that happen, but normally they give it some time. Rather, they go, okay, we're going to give you some help. And that help might be, in general, a new chief financial officer who's going to come in and help set the stage for. So I'm kind of shifting us back to the chief financial officer, because almost every one of my experiences, with one exception, I've been hired as a chief financial officer and ended up as a chief executive officer after the deal. And they wanted somebody in who they felt comfortable was going to be able to give them visibility in the language that they understood, which was generally going to be numbers and KPIs and progress against plan, to allow them to be able to evaluate the performance of the chief executive officer and management team. And in the last couple cases, it was, you've done this before, so you can help try and coach the CEO through. And if you can't, then you've built that level of trust as a chief financial officer with the private equity firm, and they tend to go, okay, you're either in the interim seat or you're in the permanent seat. I've had a couple of both, to be able to run this business. Now the chief executive, as you're kind of going through that cycle, the chief executive, as we've talked about numerous times, this is a significant change in how they do business and how they operate and how they think. And, if the private equity folks encourage you to hire somebody to help with the transition, that somebody is probably got two missions. One is to get to know the business well, just in case. And two is truly to get you set up for success. So listen to kind of the advice you're getting and don't just dismiss, because that's generally going to end up in a bad spot.
Yeah, you touched on something really quick there, and touched on something really important there, which is this concept and notion of professionals that have been there, has been through this and done that before. And I think that is something that is consistent that I've observed in private equity transactions, either into or out of, is having a team of people that know the playbook, because there is a fairly in high level there's a pretty defined playbook of how this all works. And so when Ed talked about being brought in as the CFO, or to evaluate, as somebody that's been there and done that, to evaluate, in a lot of ways the rest of the team, big boys. I think that happens a lot. I was part of the process, not too long ago. It was in 2024, where looking at a role that was going into a PE-backed company at the time of close, specifically because no one else on that team had ever been through something like that, and they need somebody to do that connective tissue. Now, I wasn't going to be a CEO candidate, but sometimes what Ed's describing is like, you go in, there's a CFO, in his case, you recognize as, well, this person's actually most capable of actually leading this from the chief executive seat, and then you kind of take it from there and reach out with the deck. That's actually how I first kind of got my first CFO role. Was like actually came in and worked for Ed, because I had previously been the CEO or CFO, being the CEO, needed a CFO because he wasn't wearing two hats. So that was kind of how these things happened. And then you find yourself in these scenarios where, because you've done it once, that means you'll then go through it again, and then you kind of get into a situation where that becomes your career, and that's the whole thing is, you're sort of singled out because of just having been through it and done it. So super fun. Yeah.
Well, I've seen something similar with the chief of staff role, where a lot of VC or PE firms will bring in a chief of staff who has been there, done that. Pair them or partner them with a founder who's like, this is their first rodeo, like everything's brand new. They're like, what the heck is happening? It's exciting and fun and challenging, but like, what is happening? And so having someone ride sidecar with them can be really beneficial. And like you said, like you mentioned, Ed, chief of staff, CFO, sometimes COO, who can translate into the language the capital partner is used to speaking in, it can be invaluable. Because if someone's like, I don't like, you want a flash report, you want to like KPIs, like what are you looking for? And then someone who's a little bit closer and embedded into the company who can then translate the other way and say, here's like what's going on, here's the puts and takes, here's all the different levers you can pull. But I think the commonality between those roles that I just mentioned, chief of staff, CFO, and COO, is they have a holistic view of the business. They're not just like specific function, and I think that is a big piece of what they're looking for.
Super true. And you guys touched on something really important too, this concept of speaking the language. This is one of those places and times where there can be some stuff lost in translation, and that's unacceptable. I've seen more instances of founders not being able to speak the language and then having a really tough time in this operator phase, as we call it in a book, because you just can't get with the program. If you're just a true entrepreneur and you're used to running everything yourself in your own exact way, and because the company is really, you are the company in some ways, that changes incredibly into this phase. And so you kind of either sink or swim in a lot of cases. Sometimes it works well when you bring in a operating CEO to sort of complement the founder and their vision and their ideals. As much as 50-50, and maybe more times than not, it actually doesn't work out very well. And so changes end up getting made. Really. So
what would you say? What would we all say? Like, given our different experiences and perspectives with this, if like how well that works. Like if someone's like, oh great, someone who's like kind of from the board, but like kind of independent from them, they're just here to help me, versus like, who the heck are you? Like, I'm not trusting you as far as I can throw you.
The best private equity firms get buy-in from the chief executive on that process before the deal closes.
Right.
They kind of say, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. They get the chief executive involved in the hiring process. It becomes a collaborative hire, and the understanding, and again, I've been part of those. My most recent plant was that structure where it was, here's it should be collaborative, and here's the approach we're going to use, and here's what we're trying to accomplish. And then, I think if you do it that way, you've got a fighting chance, 50-50.
Yeah.
If you don't, and again, I'll go back to the last one that Emily and I were at together. That one was like, we're sending this person in. They fired the prior president, the chief operating officer, and chief financial officer. They had me show up on a Monday and said, you've got these roles. The chief executive officer did not buy into this process and didn't last, 90 days past my arrival.
Yeah.
And further to that, we had someone I'm going to be careful here, an executive come on our team who we spoke to them before they officially started, but it was you're getting this person. So we've been on the receiving end of that as well, which can have mixed outcomes.
As a practical matter, again, my observation has been it takes there's at least kind of a 3-month honeymoon period where everything is great. These founders and others involved on the early end, with that accounts you got it flush, things are great. But then when it comes to actually, hitting plan numbers that you set forth in front of, potential suitors, ultimately kind of putting yourself out there as this is not operating, doesn't going to hit it. Yeah, when that doesn't come so easy, when things get a little bit strained, and within, a certain amount of time, it really, I see a lot where, there's loggerheads between founder and PE group, and sometimes CEO in the middle trying to do damage control both ways. It gets contentious, but the best thing I've seen is when you deal with those things early on, rather than up and later.
That's the key though, right? Because you come up with this business plan and there has to be agreement and discussions on that in the upfront process. And then your job as a leadership team is to execute on that business plan.
100%.
And if you're doing that, then everyone's going to be fine.
By the way, by now you have much less wiggle room with the business and the operating plan because you've probably put on a significant amount of debt on your books. Covenants, restrictives, or negatives, covenants, you name it. There's not one, and lenders are typically, they're issuing debt based on history, but also, the credibility of the plan and backstop at fund in some areas guaranteed. But that being said, if you start missing numbers, it creates a whole lot of havoc, and people tend to end up doing human things, which is get out of trips, show it's out of town, especially if you got a lot of investment and ego tied up in business.
And those covenants normally do not have a ton of wiggle room. I mean, they're normally fairly tight. Yeah, and they're fairly tight.
Yeah.
So if you start deviating from plan more than 10% or so, you're going to trip covenants. And my where I've seen this go bad a couple times has basically been we start getting off numbers and the CEO comes up with a new idea. So they start doing Hail Mary type. Okay, we're going to do a Hail Mary. Now, and I've even been guilty of some of these Hail Mary type ideas because we're missing numbers. And I'm like, okay, we're going to invent a new product that reads websites to blind people. So I mean, it's
but those deliberately and thoughtfully, you do them quickly on the fly. But I've seen people just flail, and it's no, stop panicking, just go back to the fundamentals, hit your mark.
And it's that, or they go the other direction. And I've recently talked to a founder where they basically were like, yeah, we're missing numbers, but that's not my problem because it's not my money anymore. I got a bunch of my money out, so I'm not worried about it. And I used to stay up at night worried about whether we could make payroll. That's not my problem now. And I'm if
you took it around, it's kind of your money involved, but
that's not going to last. You're not going to last too long in the king's seat if you're not paying attention to the capital. And that's what me worry is not really going to be a success. So I've tended to see those two extremes where it's they start to flail because they freak. And they're not logically moving through, okay, how do I get back on track, or is something fundamentally changed? They don't want to have the difficult conversation with their private equity sponsor. They don't want to go, hey, we made a premise here in our business plan that is no longer holding, and trying to understand why. Instead, they go, well, I got a new great idea. We're gonna go make a chopsticks rocket launch thing, or they go the other direction where they're like, screw it, I can't do it, and I'll, it's their problem, not mine.
Which on one end is why are you doing that? On the other end is that's what they did to be successful before.
Yeah.
If something goes wrong, they have to do something. They have to come up with something. And so I think what we're highlighting here is there's a mind shift and approach change, and there's also you're in a different financial position. You just might not have when you're at a founder-led company, and you're you're the original founder, if you want to move money around, you can.
Yeah.
And in this scenario, you've got a plan, and the
As long as
wiggle room.
in a lot of
and more
cases, you don't have
stakeholders a lot of
those
times.
tight covenants either.
Yeah.
Those tight
Yeah, I mean,
covenants
Yeah.
are the ones that are really gonna, and you don't
Yeah.
have someone else to answer to. You might have your family to answer
That's a
to.
big one.
Yes.
You might not take a paycheck. You might struggle yourself, but in this particular case, you've got upstream folks to answer to, and you've got covenants to meet. And if you're gonna fail on those, that's gonna be a bad answer.
Yeah, I mean, just to put a finer point on that, if you're not used to having an active, like an actual board to answer to, it can be culture shock. A lot of this for a founder that may have a board, but it's more like friends of family investors.
Yep.
And I think there's like a nuance in there. I want to call out that there are times within the premise of we have a business plan, execute to the plan, where like, hey, we had this plan and now it needs to change for like valid, legitimate reasons. So let's talk about that. Like, let me not just do that on my own.
Yeah.
But hey, like COVID happened, or an industry shift happened, or just like this isn't working like we expect it to. And here are some of my ideas about, moving to an adjacent approach.
Mhm.
And like those conversations can and should happen. And a founder and CEO can bring those ideas to the table, knowing that they might get told no, but sometimes it is like, what's the creative process and what new ideas
And
can you
normally
bring to the table?
that founder is going to know that market and that business's
that's right.
capabilities
Oh, wow.
better than anybody.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Same with that management team. That when you start going off, we're getting a little off topic, but when you get a little bit off course on your business, engage the management team, and then engage the private equity folks, and this becomes a group collaborative solution session rather than it's all on your shoulders, or it's not your problem. It's in the middle. It's actually everybody's challenge, everybody's problem, and everybody can contribute. And your job as a chief executive is to manage that process.
And I think like one of the things there is everyone's first option is for this to work, like with the management team intact. I mean, like, because they do know so much about the company, the industry, et cetera. Like everyone's option A is to make this work. They will have there will be contingency plans for option B, C, D, E, F, but like it's in everyone's best interest to get this thing to work.
Yeah. On paper, yeah. Yeah.
And the next thing is, from the investor's perspective, they've just invested a whole bunch of money in this thing and they want results. So basically, like when we're talking about prove that you're executing to the business plan, it's like prove that you are tracking and making progress to the results that the PE firm wants. Is that like a simplified version?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. That's spot on. I mean, again, I keep coming back to this concept of debt. It's such a big part of this operating phase of the private equity. There's a lot of it. It's pretty much always there. And so hitting your business plan means you're able to generate free cash flow to service new debt. So if that's a major deviations from that or just problematic, it's sound like business pre-transaction, you might be bootstrapping, might be owning own money, it might be equity from friends, families, investors, angels, etc. You don't need to actually have a payback period of anything really specifically defined. But now you're in more structure. There's more structure from top down. There's just more structure in this world, governance wise, financing wise, all of the above. So hitting numbers is probably more important.
The key that we used, Emily, in the companies that I've run or been chief financial officer in has been the concept of a flash report, a weekly flash report, where we identified based upon our business requirements and a business plan, what are the 4 to 6, not 600, not 2, what are the 4 to 6 key drivers to ensure that we're either on track or off track, and could be early warnings to be on track, off track, or ahead of plan, behind plan. We would report that out internally every week. We would report that out to the private equity team every week. And, I would generally voice over on my weekly calls when I was the chief executive. I would use that as the briefing sheet, and we would, I would voice over a narrative around it. I would generally ask my C-level folks and department heads to give me inputs, but you can't allow it's that classic, like the further you get off track, it's that, 1 degree off, on an airliner. If you decide to
Yeah.
go from Seattle and you're headed to London, you may very well end up in Paris. And
Yeah.
that's a problem. The further you go without making the course correction, the harder it is to course correct. And so we used the flash report, and it was it's a weekly cadence.
Yeah.
And with the clients I've got today, they have flash reports and it's a weekly cadence. And, at least then you know where you're at and you can start making adjustments accordingly to get yourself on track or to reset expectations.
Yeah. We should do a whole episode on Flash Report. We'll take a note of that. Okay, so we talked about like CEO, founder changes, CFO changes, which might be a brand new CFO
Yeah.
brought in by the PE firm.
Yes.
What are some other like call out changes to the leadership team that people should be aware of?
The biggest one that I'm gonna go right near your wheelhouse, Sander. The biggest one is I have found, and it didn't matter whether it was at Beeline with Karina, whether it was at G2 Web Services with Karina, or whether it was at Fusion Zone Automotive with Emily. Anytime I've been in a chief executive role where you've had a private equity sponsor, there is a change in how you have to manage those disparate departments, you kind of internally manage. And I have relied on, either in name or in function, a chief of staff, where a lot of times folks don't have such a function in their organization prior to private equity. You're generally going to need it after, because there's so much additional reporting, there's so much additional intelligence that's needed. You're moving that much faster that the coordination becomes very, very, very difficult to have the CEO or CFO trying to do all that at once. And it's a broader scope than even a chief operating officer is going to have. And so that change is one that I will pound on the table. I think when I did your Leveraging Leadership podcast a year or so ago, I kind of said, look, this is something you need to consider if you're in that position. And I'd say it again here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I see like lots of capital partners pretty much demanding, like, you will have a chief of staff. You can go find one, or we have one in our team that we can deploy into this portco. And I also see a lot of founders, like 5 to 10 people in.
Yeah.
One of their first hires is a chief of staff now. And it's like they're doing functional roles and then they hand off as they recruit and hire people. But it's becoming more of a thing because they are that like Jack or Jill of all trades.
Sure.
And they can be a sweeper and kind of porpoise in and out of like the tactical and practical, the strategic back down again. And, altitude of involvement is high, and then they kind of dive deep down into the organization. So,
with so many other stakeholders in this new world, you're coordinating vertically and horizontally, whether it's like needing to line up the requirements of ledgers with the operations of the business, line up the governance of a board with the management of the business, coordinating all of these things and making sure that all these things are, and by the way, executing the core business plan. I mean, there's just so much involved that we do need that conductor in a lot of ways, even if you have very capable C-level executives individually.
And sometimes, I mean, I remember talking to people further down the org, VP, directors, management level, who like their world, like maybe not had been as changed as much by PE investors coming on, but they knew things were different and they knew things were at a different pace and different things were happening around them. And, if the CEO and C-suite team, like this is their first rodeo, how are they going to communicate that down to their people? So just helping at all levels of the organization, like it's going to be fine. Here's what's happening. Here's what we need to do. Everyone go this way, and like, good job going this way. And now we're just going to rinse and repeat and keep making progress. So I think even someone just in and out of the organization like that can be helpful. What else? I'm trying to think in the last few minutes here for this one. Big transition has happened.
Well,
new board structure, maybe some new leadership members.
The other piece, and this is going more on a CFO side as well. I know we put it in the book, but there's a lot of new reporting that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And one of the positions that I have tended to be late in hiring to my own detriment has been someone who is a financial planning and analysis specialist. whether that's at mid-tier, senior, or even junior. And we've had some, I mean, between Rory and I, we've had some really talented folks
We really had,
that have been in that FP&A role. But that is
some of whom are now, C-level officers themselves. Like, it's been really cool to see
including
that.
Rory Liebhart. So I mean, those are
and I mean others that have kind of worked for me over time as well. It's a really important role.
It is an absolutely critical role, and a lot of times what I see is CFOs and CEOs, especially those that have gone through the transition and are kind of riding through, so they were there before. They don't realize kind of what the tsunami of reporting is going to be and the level of detail that they're going to need. And I would put high on my list of, like, here's something that needs to change. The reporting is going to be forced on you. The data gathering, data-driven decisions, and all this other, kind of wonky stuff is going to come down on you. You should be pretty quickly prepared to bring on an FP&A analyst, or at least, if not bring someone on, talk to the private equity folks about, can they provide you with some help initially to get you set up with reporting packages, and because they should be reasonably familiar, given that they did the underwriting, what they're looking for KPIs and other things. So ask them to help at the beginning, and they may see the need and authorize you to hire, even if it's not in your budget. But that's going to be something that's a big change, and that's going to be something that the CFO needs to embrace quickly.
And the PE firm also often has a associate, because we use, we use basically their associate level on a fractional basis for a number of our companies we've been at. So that's a good call.
I think also, a lot of other considerations, again, when you take on additional stakeholders at an institutional level, that sort of thing, you may never have gone through financial audit flow, may never have had to, and then you start to get into that level of requirement, not only PE listed, but other requirements and things like that, borrowing bases, all of these things. And that's where I think the premium in the prior generation of the business is all about bookkeeping and, some very high level financial analysis probably, but in this iteration, it's much more about, as I said, FP&A, planning and analysis, governance, compliance, all of these things that maybe the homegrown person that you've had in the role, that's, I don't know, whatever title it may be, but the head of finance and accounting may just be over her head.
I got one last one, which is, as I was thinking through it, which is, you as the chief executive probably dealt with, I'll do my own contracts, or I've got, my brother-in-law Stu will do the contracts, and my insurance. I've got, my buddy John does my insurance. When you get into this environment, expect your legal bills and your insurance to go way up, because the private equity guys are looking at this going, how do I mitigate uncontrollable risks, or how do I control risks that would otherwise be existential and outside my control? And so you will end up with, probably about 2/3 of the time, we've had new insurance brokers who had completely new policies, and the amount of the premium went up 2-3x because they wanted to get higher limits or additional coverage. And then the second was, I've been in situations, and again, I'm a practicing attorney, where I've been told, nope, that's nice. I like your JD. I like your license. You're sending this off to $700 an hour law firm to review. And, and just because we're not going to take that risk. And, it could be simple stuff like a lease, and they're going, nope, we're not going to take that risk. Send it off and get it done. And don't take that personal, and recognize that that's a change. It's a risk management approach that the private equity guys use to take their risk premium down. And, Stu and John are great guys, and I'm sure you've enjoyed working with them over the years, but it ain't your company anymore, and you're probably going to have to work with some new professionals in that risk management area.
Yeah. Okay. And the last one I'll throw out there is, as you're kind of like shuffling the deck chairs, there's often hidden talent in your organization that might have an opportunity to pop out into a different role, like a promoted role. And so if you have talent on your team, this can be a catalyst for like putting them in positions to go on and do good things. I mean, I've had this happen to me, Rory. We've had that experience, and all three of us have paid this forward to other people as well. So that's just something to keep an eye out for. Like, who on my team is like, oh my gosh, okay, Sandra over here or Damien over there. Like, yes, let's move them into this new role.
Yeah. I think, well, first off, I think, talent recognition, talent management, all that stuff is like, that should be happening whether or not you're in that private equity. Let's just say that.
For sure.
But
there just might be big moves happening right now.
What you're forced with is moving pieces around to accommodate the new needs of the business. And what I've observed and experienced, and led is change that really unlocks more capabilities for people and gives them a shot. Well, maybe in another environment that just the playing field was just small, right? So people were in their lanes, and now there's just more to do. The last thing anyone wants to do is spend a bunch of money new, and we all know that there's so much value in what incumbent, folks have as far as knowledge of the business, knowledge of the customers in particular. So you just, whenever you expand, you look inward first. I think that's always the best thing. And I think in private equity, I see it the most because, it seems like the most logical step on having to go completely outside the business, incur more costs probably, and have a longer ramp to getting somebody up and running. And that's what I would say too, is, time seems to move very quickly under peak need.
Oh yeah.
You're under strict timelines, and results are required fast. So you really want to put a premium on the talent you have there, the understand the business. And it's a super awesome byproduct of the flourishing that role, and getting an opportunity.
And if you're the new guy that gets inserted by the PE, do one-on-ones with everybody.
Everything.
You can get away with it. I've done that pretty much every time I've walked into an organization and found hidden talent that had gotten pigeonholed because they'd been there so long and they blah, 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 blah. And they didn't, and if you're the new guy, talk to everybody, do one-on-ones, get it all out on the table. You're going to find some amazing people that probably have not gotten recognized because they were hired as the receptionist and that's all they've done for 15 years, but they're capable of doing a hell of a lot more.
I agree.
I'm going to leave it on that. That's a good note to leave it on.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Now, all right, listeners, now you know a little bit more about what happens after the deal goes down, and we will catch you next time on the Private Equity Experience podcast.
Catch you later.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.